There are so many menu options in today's DSLRs, and the Nikon D800 is no exception. The menus are expansive. So, in this video, I want to show you some highlights. I just want to show you kind of the things that you might access the most often, or the things that you might want to access before you even get started with taking photos with your camera. But then, in future videos, I will go through all of the details and every little camera setting and all of the options that you have in each of the different menus in the camera. But for now, I just want to show you the highlights, and I'll also throw in a quick review of the info button at the end. Let's start out at the top, at menu number 1, which is the playback menu. The one thing that you might want to take a look at in the playback menu to get you started out is the image review option. You can either have that on or off. An image review is just where, when you take a photo, whether or not it pops up on your LCD screen on the back of the camera for a few seconds. If you have it off, it doesn't. If you have it on, it does. Next, let's move to the shooting menu, which is the second menu down on the left-hand side. Let's take a look at the secondary slot function. You can decide if you want to have the images overflow from your primary slot to your secondary slot. So by that it means that when your first card fills up, it just goes to the second one. Or you can have the images back up, which means just right to both cards. And that could be really important or really useful for you if you are doing something important, like shooting a wedding or something where it's kind of once in a lifetime, where you aren't going to be able to get these photos again. You might want to, just to be sure, have the images right to both cards. You also have an option to write RAW files to one card and JPEG files to the other card, which is another option you might want to use. Next, you have image quality and image size. Both of these you can adjust using other buttons on your camera, on the camera body itself. So you may or may not want to use it in the menus, but here it is, just if you do. Another important option on the D800 is the image area option. You have two options here. You have the auto DX crop on or off, which that means that if you put a DX lens on your D800, which is an FX camera, if this option is on, you can choose for the camera just to automatically go to a DX crop. Next, you have choose image area. You have the option to utilize different areas of the sensor. You don't have to utilize the entire sensor all of the time. So if you want to, for example, just use the DX area of your sensor, even if you are using an FX lens, you can choose that image area here. You also might want to take a look at white balance. There is a white balance button on the top of the camera. That is probably usually how you're going to adjust your white balance. But you also might want to use something that I use a lot, and that's the preset manual option. You have to set each preset manual slot, if you will, in this section of the menu. Setting picture control is right here. Now you also can do this just using the button on the camera, but just in case you wanted to use your menu, it's right here. Your active D-lighting options are here as well, and your HDR options are in this menu. You also have the option to turn on or off long exposure noise reduction. And in ISO sensitivity settings, you will probably be changing your ISO using the dedicated button at the top of your camera, but you also might want to use auto ISO, and this is where you access auto ISO and set up the parameters for your auto ISO sensitivity. Also in this menu is your interval timer shooting. This is where you get your interval timer shooting started, but also where you set the parameters for it. Next is the custom settings menu. That's the third menu down. And this is a very long list of options. The first one is your autofocus continuous priority selection. You also have the autofocus single priority selection right underneath it. In here, you can choose how your camera is going to focus in each of these modes. The next option down is focus tracking with lock on. You can change the amount of time the camera is going to spend before it will start tracking your subject. And then further down on this menu, you have the auto meter off delay. I happen to prefer mine to stay on for longer. And moving down, we have the flash control for the built-in flash or optional flash. This is where you can decide how the pop-up flash is going to behave. I like to use manual a lot because I optically trigger my strobes in the studio or sometimes my speed lights. So I can pop up the flash, put it on manual at a low power, and have no problem with optically triggering my flashes. This is also where you can use commander mode with that pop-up flash too. And moving down, you can assign your function button as well as your preview button. So you can assign how it will behave when you press the button, or also when you press the button and use the command dials. And then the last thing in the menu is your time zone and date. This is where you would decide what your time zone is and what time and day it is so that you'll have the right time and date stamp on your image file. And on your info screen, you can see that there is a wealth of information. If you press the button once, you can see how the camera is set. And then if you press the button again, you can actually make changes to some of these things. So that's your general overview of the Nikon D800 menus and the info button. Now, like I said in the beginning, I will definitely be doing a bunch of videos on the menus because I will go into minute detail on each of the menus in the camera. So stay tuned for those, but definitely let me know if you have any questions.